I won $47 million. Sounds like something people only dream about, right? But the moment I saw those numbers on my ticket line up perfectly with the screen on the TV, I didn't scream, didn't pop champagne, didn't call anyone. Instead, my whole body shook like someone had just dropped a ticking bomb into my hands. I sat frozen in my tiny apartment in Portland, rain tapping outside like it always does on spring nights in Oregon, asking myself, what am I supposed to do with all this money? If it were you, what would you do first? Call your parents? Text your siblings? Post it on Facebook? Or tell your best friend? Me, I did the opposite. I hid it. Why would someone who just escaped a life of debt decide to stay quiet? Why would I, the one who once sacrificed to cover my brother's rehab bills, who helped my sister have her dream wedding, not want to share this with them? As the rain outside poured harder, I realized my heart wasn't pounding from joy. It was fear. I thought of all those stories about lottery winners who lost everything, families torn apart, friends turning their backs, whole towns whispering behind their shoulders. I remembered the times I'd been used, when it felt like my wallet was the only thing holding fragile ties with people I loved. So I sat there, clutching that ticket soaked with sweat, whispering to myself, no. No one can know. But then the questions started crashing through my head like a storm rolling over the Oregon coast. Am I making a mistake? By keeping this secret, am I turning into a selfish person? If I share it, will I lose everything? And how will I ever know who truly cares about me and who only cares about the number in my bank account? That was the beginning of a journey I never imagined. A journey of secrets, betrayal, family put to the test, and the price of trust. If it were you, what would you do first? Leave a comment, and I'll tell you why I chose silence. My name's Rachel Miller. I'm 34 and I live in Portland, Oregon. If you've ever been here, you know Portland is a city of endless gray rain and cozy little coffee shops tucked into every corner. I'm about 5'5", brown hair usually pulled back in a bun for work, and a round face that makes me look younger than I am. Most people say my eyes give away my feelings too easily, which I've always thought was more of a weakness than a gift. My apartment's out on the east side, just a one-bedroom. It barely fits an old couch, an overflowing bookshelf, and a small dining table by the window. In winter, the heater rattles every time it kicks on. In summer, the ceiling fan hums all night long. It's not fancy, but it's mine. It's where I can finally breathe after long days at the office. I work as an accountant at a small marketing company. Sounds steady, but it's not. My boss, Arnold, loves stealing my ideas and passing them off as his own. My coworker Derek leaves early all the time, dumping his reports on my desk. Tax season means 60-hour weeks, and most of the time nobody even notices what I do. I tell myself at least I've got a paycheck to cover rent, car insurance, and the medical bills I haven't finished paying. My family complicated is the nicest word I can use. My dad, Thomas Miller, used to teach high school physics. He believes in rules, formulas, and saving every penny. After divorcing my mom, he married Clara, a woman who dreams of designer handbags and Miami vacations. She made his life flashier, but also pushed him further away from me. My mom, Elaine, went a different route. She married Richard, a rich businessman with little affection to spare. Richard never saw me as family. To him, I was just baggage from a second marriage. At dinners, he'd go on about profits and investments while I sat in silence, counting the minutes until I could retreat to my cramped little room. My brother David is 2 years older and always broke. He's been a car salesman, a bartender, then unemployed again. Every time I see him, there's a new reason to borrow money. "I'll pay you back soon" is basically his catchphrase. Once, I drained my savings to send him to rehab, only to find out he never even checked in. My sister Emily is the complete opposite. She went Ivy League, married a surgeon named Brian, and now lives in a big house in the suburbs with 2 angelic kids. Their walls are covered with photos from Disney World, Hawaii, and places I can only dream about. Every holiday, the talk is all about Emily's achievements. I just sit there, smiling politely. Out of all my relatives, Aunt Linda, my mom's younger sister, is the one I trust. She's a grade school teacher who lives in a little apartment filled with books and plants. Her old Honda groans every time it starts, but she never complains. On the other hand, there's Aunt Margaret, my dad's sister. She's wealthy, always dressed to impress, and never misses a chance to criticize my job, my apartment, even the fact that I'm still single. And then there's Kyle, Margaret's son. My cousin got her arrogance, but none of her money. He gambles, racks up debt, and the whole family just pretends not to notice. When I think about my family, two words always come to mind: love and money. And for us, those two things have never gone together. Every day before everything changed felt like the same tape, playing on repeat. 6 in the morning, the alarm buzzed, and I'd jump up in my little one-bedroom apartment in Portland. Third floor of an old building, walls stained from the rain. Windows creaking every time the Columbia River breeze pushed through. I'd pull the curtains and see another gray morning. Raindrops sticking to the glass, just another spring day in Oregon. I'd walk into the kitchen and switch on the cheap coffee maker I'd had since college. It groaned and hissed, filling the air with the smell of strong but slightly burnt coffee. That was how my mornings started, even though they never felt like a fresh start. I'd lean against the counter, cup in hand, staring down at my expense notebook. Every morning the same math. Add, subtract, and hope the numbers lined up enough to cover the power bill, the car insurance, and the leftover credit card debt. By 7, I'd be driving my 10-year-old Toyota Corolla. On rainy days, and in Portland that's almost every day, the car squeaked like it was just as tired as I was. I'd squeeze onto I-84 with everyone else, eyes drifting toward the glowing billboards for shiny new startups, wondering when I'd ever break out of this loop. At the office, I blended into the rush inside our small marketing firm. Arnold, my boss, strutted in with his smug smile, and before long I'd hear him pitching new ideas to clients, ideas I'd spent the whole week putting together. Derek, the guy at the desk next to mine, always found a way to duck out early, leaving his pile of reports on my desk without shame. I'd gotten used to staying late, tapping away while the city lights flickered outside, only to wake up the next morning and do it all over again. My personal life wasn't much better. Sometimes friends invited me out for birthdays, dinners, or just drinks at a bar. I usually made excuses. Sorry, I've got extra work, or I'm too tired. Maybe next time. The truth? I couldn't afford it. A simple dinner at an Italian place downtown could wipe out a week's budget. I remember once, my best friend Sophie invited me and the group to a concert. I wanted to go so badly, but I turned it down and stayed home, listening to the rain and wondering when I'd finally be able to say yes instead of no. The hardest part was how my family always saw me as the financial rescue. When David called, crying that he needed $5,000 for rehab, I emptied my savings. Months later, I found out he never went. When Emily got married, I swiped my credit card for $2,000 worth of flowers and decorations, with the promise, we'll pay you back after the honeymoon. 5 years later, not a dime came back. My dad, Thomas, once called saying he needed money to fix his roof after a storm. I sent what little I had, only to see him weeks later smiling in Cancun with Clara, margarita in hand. I still remember staring at my bank account, watching the balance sink into the danger zone, while everyone else around me carried on with their lives like nothing was wrong. They lived. I worried. For a long time, I believed if I just gave more, they'd love me more. But the truth? I was nothing more than a walking wallet. In my family, love was never free. My 34th birthday came, and nothing felt special. It was another gray, rainy Portland day with that familiar misty drizzle. After I left the office, I drove my old Corolla toward home, but instead of turning straight into the lot, I stopped at the corner convenience store on Sandy Boulevard. The shop owner, Gus, a man in his 60s with a bit of a stoop, had known me for years. I still stopped by once a week to buy a few lottery tickets. He smiled as soon as he saw me walk in. "Happy birthday, Rachel. Doubling down tonight?" I smiled, a little embarrassed. "Yeah, Gus. Make it $20 instead of $10. Consider it a gift to myself." He handed me the stack of tickets and squinted. Maybe today's your day. People say birthdays bring luck. Instead of letting the machine pick numbers like usual, I stayed by the counter, grabbed a pen, and wrote 6 familiar numbers. My dad Thomas's birthday, my mom Elaine's birthday, my sister Emily's, Aunt Linda's, my own birthday, and the day I first met Sophie. Each number carried a memory, some good, some not. I folded the ticket, put it in my wallet, and said goodbye to Gus. That night, Portland kept raining. I picked up Thai takeout from the place near my apartment and poured a glass of red wine Sophie had given me. The apartment was quiet, just the sound of rain and wind slipping through the window cracks. I ate a little, scrolled social media, and saw friends partying at a bar while I sat alone. Around 8:30, I remembered the ticket. Not really excited, I checked my phone. The first number was 03. My heart froze. Right, my birthday. The second number was 16. I frowned. That's Emily's birthday. The third was 12. I held my breath. My mom's birthday. The fourth was 21. My dad's. My hand started shaking, my heart pounding faster. The fifth was 09. Aunt Linda. I couldn't breathe. Then the last number was 30. The day I met Sophie. I dropped the remote. I couldn't believe it. I turned on the TV and rewound the live drawing. On screen, the numbers appeared exactly as I'd written them. 6 numbers. All of them. I, Rachel Miller, had won the $47 million jackpot. I sat frozen, palms sweaty, heart pounding like a drum. The little apartment felt suddenly strange. I should have jumped up and shouted, called my family, told the world. But instead a weird fear rose up and swallowed the joy. I opened my laptop and typed lottery winners after winning. A bunch of articles popped up. A man in Florida won tens of millions but was bankrupt after 5 years, abandoned by friends. A woman in New Jersey was sued by family for not sharing. A man in California was robbed and killed because he didn't keep his identity secret. I read each story like a blade cutting into me. They lost everything, family, friends, even their lives, all because of one ticket. The screen light reflected on my face, while the rain outside fell harder and harder. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the clock tick and the wind howl at the window. I thought of David. He'd demand a cut if he knew. I thought of Emily. She'd tell everyone, and the whole town would call me an ATM on 2 legs. I thought of Thomas, of Elaine, of Clara and Richard. None of them ever really cared about me, only the money I could hand out. Then, in that quiet slice of a night, I told myself aloud, clear as anything, no. Nobody finds out. This is my secret. At least for now. 2 days after I found out I won, I decided to get professional help. I couldn't let this luck turn into a disaster. On the drive to downtown Portland, my heart was pounding and my hands were sweaty. I parked in front of a tall glass building where Peter Graham worked, the financial lawyer I'd found after hours of searching online. Inside the lobby, the marble floor shone, and the smell of polished wood hung in the air. Everything there felt orderly, disciplined, totally unlike the mess inside me. The receptionist led me to a large room. Oregon landscape paintings hung on the walls. A shiny walnut desk sat in the middle. A man in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and glasses with thin rims, stood and shook my hand. "Hello, Ms. Miller. Please have a seat. How can I help you today?" I opened my purse and set the ticket on the table. My hands were still shaking. I need to know how to get this money without anyone finding out. Peter picked up the ticket and inspected it carefully. He looked up at me, calm but sharp. "First, congratulations. Second, you did the right thing coming to me before telling anyone. The biggest mistake lottery winners make is telling too soon. Once word gets out, you'll never get your piece back." For more than 2 hours, he explained everything in detail. I could set up an anonymous trust so the money wouldn't be linked directly to my name. From there, we could open different investment accounts, stocks, bonds, real estate funds. He stressed long-term planning. This money had to be enough to keep me safe for the rest of my life, even if I never worked another day. I took notes nonstop, my head spinning from all the new ideas. Peter reassured me, "You don't need to become an expert. Your job is to keep the secret. My job is to help you protect it. And remember, Rachel, don't change your life too suddenly. Don't buy a luxury car next week. Don't move to a beach mansion. Keep living your normal life, at least for a while." I nodded. "So you want me to live two lives?" Peter smiled. "Exactly. A regular woman who goes to work every day, and a millionaire quietly building a future behind the scenes." When I left the building holding the thick file of papers, I felt like I'd just signed a contract with fate. Late Portland sunlight filtered through the light rain, coating everything in a damp gold. I knew in that moment my life had split in two. Out there I'd still be Rachel Miller, a tired accountant driving an old Corolla, clipping coupons. But inside those files, I was a millionaire with a brand new future. An ordinary person pretending to be rich, and a rich person pretending to be ordinary. That was going to be the hardest role of my life. The days after the lawyer meeting, I slipped back into my usual routine. I still stayed at the office until late. I still drove my rattle of a Corolla to my tiny apartment. I still used coupons at the grocery store. But inside me, a new urge grew. I wanted the truth. I wanted to know who in my family really loved me and who just saw me as a source of money. One Friday night, Sophie stopped by. We met our freshman year, both working at the campus library and sharing ramen when money was tight. More than 10 years later, that friendship was still steady. Sophie was a nurse at the hospital. Her job wore her out, but she never let me feel alone. We sat on the balcony with glasses of red wine. Portland at night was misty with drizzle and car lights reflected on the wet street. I turned my glass, took a deep breath, and said, "Sophie, I have something on my mind." "A test." She tilted her head and frowned. "What kind of test? You're not talking about work, right? I want to know how much my family really cares. I'm going to say I lost my job and need $5,000 for rent and medical bills. If they help, maybe family still means something. If they refuse, I'll know the truth." Sophie put her glass down hard, her voice sharp for once. "Rachel, do you hear yourself? That is basically manipulating them. This is not how you usually live." I looked straight at her and felt a sting. Manipulating? Or just checking the mirror? For years, I've given and given. David borrowed money and disappeared. Emily used my credit card for her wedding. My dad asked for money to fix the roof and then went on a trip. What do I have left? An empty account and silence when I needed them. If I want to see who's really on my side now, am I wrong? Sophie sighed. Her voice softened but stayed worried. "I'm just afraid this will hurt you more. Because the answer, Rachel, you might already know it." I didn't answer. That night, after Sophie left, I opened an old journal and sat at the small table by the window. The rain kept falling. I carefully wrote a cover story, so it would sound convincing. I would say the marketing company I worked for lost its biggest client and shut down in a week. The CEO was caught in a financial scandal, so none of us got our final pay. I'd say I spent my savings on medical tests and that rent was due. I would not look desperate, but I would be believable enough to get help. Then I listed each family member and wrote my guess of how they would react. Elaine, my mom, probably sympathetic at first, then quickly find a way to dodge responsibility and push it onto Richard. Thomas, my dad, will lecture me about saving and then refuse to help. Emily, my sister, might fake concern but claim she needs money for tuition and a new car. David, my brother, will avoid it, send a short text, then disappear. Clara and Richard, I expect coldness, nothing more. Aunt Margaret will mock me and tell the whole extended family. Cal might promise to help but break that promise like always. Aunt Linda, the only one I still hope for, even though she has little to give. Closing the journal, my chest ached. Maybe Sophie was right. Maybe I already knew how this would turn out. But this time, I wanted to see it with my own eyes. I wanted clear proof of what family loyalty in my house actually meant. Early Monday morning, with a thin mist hanging over the Willamette, I decided to start the test. I picked Mom first. Part of me still believed she'd be the first to reach out. I took a deep breath to steady myself and called. On the third ring, sounding busy but concerned, I started. Mom, my company just lost a big client. The CEO is in trouble. I was suddenly let go. A short silence. Then, in that familiar soft tone, she said, "Oh my poor thing. Have you filed for unemployment? What about your emergency savings?" At the hint about money, I swallowed and tried to keep my voice steady. "I need about $5,000 to cover rent and some medical tests. I'll pay you back as soon as I find work." After a slow, long breath, she admitted, "I get it, but Richard just put a deposit down on the lake house. Cash is tight right now." Then, awkward and evasive, she suggested, "Maybe you should ask your dad or Emily. Brian makes good money." My heart sank. When I hung up, my grip on the phone left my knuckles white. Driving home, the drizzle dotted my windshield, and I felt hollow and numb. At noon, I texted Dad and asked to meet at a cafe on any Broadway. He came in his old tweed coat, looking like a man ready to give a lecture. When I told him the cover story, calm and composed, he said, "I taught you about a 6-month emergency fund many times. What did you do with that plan?" While his spoon clinked against his cup, he went on, "This is a lesson. You need to learn to live below your means." I tried to interrupt. "I just need 5,000. "I will," but he cut me off, closing the conversation. "I can't touch my retirement fund. That would be irresponsible." My throat tightened. Leaving the cafe, my heart raced, and my head felt oddly empty. I'd asked for a hand. I got a lecture. That afternoon, I drove out to the suburbs to see Emily. Her 2-story house was spotless. The lawn looked like carpet. The garage still smelled like the new leather from her Audi. She opened the door with a practiced smile. "You okay?"
Come in.
She offered a latte from the expensive espresso machine. I smiled and said, "I was laid off. I need to borrow 5,000 to get through the month." Emily set her cup down and looked worried. "Oh God, that's awful. Have you applied anywhere else?" I nodded. Then, softer, she admitted, "It's a tough time. We just paid private school tuition for the kids, and we just got the Audi. I'll talk to Brian tonight and text you." She hugged me quickly before I left. Her perfume stuck to my coat. As I stepped off the porch, I knew that hug wasn't going to turn into a check. That night, she read my message and then stayed silent for days. Next was David, my brother. I sent a long message explaining everything and waited. After the read receipt, he replied in his usual blunt way, "Sorry, sis. Things are rough. I'll call later." Then he disappeared, like he'd never been there. I sat in my car outside my building, Portland's night heavy around me, my phone cold in my hand. A wave of sadness rose up. I felt like I was shouting into an empty room. The next day, I called Clara, Dad's new wife. The moment I said I needed a loan, she answered in a flat, chilly tone, "Rachel, I'm sorry, but our budget and your father's are already tied up with a summer vacation and the kitchen remodel." Then she pushed the responsibility back to me. "You should learn to cut back. Maybe move in with someone for a while." When I reminded her about helping pay to fix the roof last year, she tightened the story. "That was a family asset. You benefited too." I wanted to ask, "So when do I get invited to that cabin again?" But I held back. In that moment, I saw a future where every dollar I'd ever given would be rewritten as my duty. I decided to call Richard, Mom's husband, directly. I didn't expect much, but I wanted to hear him say it. He answered with a dry voice like a report, "Not my responsibility. I've supported your mother long enough. Your financial issues are yours to handle." My throat closed. A chill ran down my spine. I looked out the window. The rain had stopped and the sky was a dull gray, but inside me it felt like a new frost had settled. I guessed Aunt Margaret's response before I got there. I went to her big West Hills house, where the floorboards creaked under expensive heels. When I told her, she smiled thinly and cut like a knife with her eyes. "I told you that company was unstable. You should have taken that bank job back then." I politely asked to borrow $5,000 and promised to pay it back. In her judging voice, she shut it down.
No.
That's not how adults solve problems. You need to learn responsibility. As I walked out, my phone buzzed. Emily texted, "Someone told me to check with the family." I looked up at the gray sky and felt my chest tighten. Margaret had already started spreading it. Last was Kyle, Margaret's son. I called him because, despite everything, sometimes he acted generous. When I told him I needed money urgently, he perked up and said theatrically, "Meet me at the old diner tomorrow at noon. I'll bring a check." I got there 15 minutes early and sat by the window, watching the wet parking lot. At 12:10, no Kyle. At 12:30 a.m. text, "Sorry, something came up. Let's do next week." I set my phone down and heard the hollow sound of it on the wood table. In that moment, I realized this was just the start of endless delays. The rhythm of the days that followed was the same. Fake sympathy, ready excuses, casual cruelty, then silence. Mom said she'd talk to Richard, and that was the end. Dad sent a long link about personal finance instead of calling. Emily posted a photo of her kids' swim class with a caption "Family First" while my messages went unread. David vanished completely. Clara suggested I sell some things to make space. Richard acted like our call never happened. Margaret called Mom again, talking in circles about my spending habits. And Kyle, as expected, postponed twice more and then went radio silent. After each call, I developed a ritual. I'd sit in my car, turn off the engine, leave the windows closed, and listen to the wind in the trees along the avenue. Sometimes I shook and felt a cold, hollow grow in my chest. It wasn't about 5,000. It was about something quietly cracking, the meaning of home. I remembered the few things I'd had and given away. I remembered promises that were lighter than breath and then gone. I remembered their laughter at Thanksgiving when Emily's successes filled the room and I sat quiet with a stiff, polite smile. One night, while washing dishes, my phone buzzed with a family group text. Margaret shared an article about minimalism with the comment, "Some people should learn not to spend beyond their means." My head spun and my body froze. I hadn't asked for charity. I'd asked for a lifeline while I was falling. And they answered with scissors. On the last night of that string of calls and refusals, I took my journal out onto the balcony. Portland felt sharp with cold, and the woods still smelled of rain. I checked off each name. Elaine asked Richard Thomas a valuable lesson. Emily talked to Brian David. Sorry, sis Clara, move in with someone. Richard, not my responsibility. Margaret, I told you, so call check next week. The final note felt like a verdict. After 7 pleas, all I got was silence, excuses, and luxurious reasons. When I closed the book, a muted feeling told me tough days were coming, but not in the way they expected. I didn't need 5,000 anymore. I needed the truth. And the truth, raw and cruel, had shown itself. I dried my hands, put down my pen, and looked up at Oregon's gray sky. In that silent moment, time felt frozen. All that remained was the steady beat of my heart, strong, stubborn, a reminder. I won't give away my worth to buy affection. I will stand up. This time, I'll be the one writing the script. That night, after leaving Aunt Margaret's house, I didn't drive straight home. I sat in my old Corolla, parked in the empty lot near Laurelhurst Park. Portland's darkness wrapped around me. Only the dim streetlights smeared across the rain-streaked windshield. I gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles went white. My heart pounded like it was going to burst out of my chest. My vision blurred. I blinked, but the tears kept coming down my cheeks. I heard my own ragged breaths. My throat tightened. In that moment, a cold thought cut through, sharp as a knife. Am I just a walking wallet? A walking wallet. And when I'm empty, no one wants to keep me. I thought of every call, every answer. Mom pushed the responsibility onto Richard. Dad turned my situation into a moral lesson. Emily hugged me but used tuition and the new Audi as excuses. David hid. Clara and Richard washed their hands of it. Margaret spread the story. Kyle promised and then disappeared. Each person, each reaction, felt like another stab in the same place. I buried my face in the wheel. A car horn sounded far off and faded into the rainy night. Time felt frozen. I trembled, wanting to scream but too drained to make a sound. My body folded, spent. Then my phone rang, cutting through the silence. I glanced at the screen, eyes still wet. The name froze me. Linda. The only one I hadn't called. My aunt had called me first, before I could even ask. In that moment I swallowed and held my feelings down. My heart was still racing, but deep inside, a faint light had just flickered on. The next day Portland was wet again, rain running down the diner window on Sandy Boulevard. The neon sign was faded and flickering. Inside it smelled like weak coffee and slightly burnt pancakes. I walked in, my coat speckled with rain, and saw Aunt Linda sitting in the usual corner by the window. She waved, smiling kindly. "Rachel, come here. Sit down, sweetheart." I sat across from a woman who looked a lot older than my childhood memory, gray hair tied back neat, a plain sweater, ink smudges on her hand from grading papers. We ordered 2 burgers and coffee. As spoons clinked against ceramic, she asked gently, "Your mom told me you lost your job. Are you okay?" My throat tightened at that. I just nodded and tried to stick to the script I'd rehearsed. After the server brought the food, Aunt Linda opened her worn purse and took out a brown envelope. She pushed it toward me. "Take it, Rachel. There's $3,000 in here. Not a lot, but it'll get you through the month." I was stunned. I knew she lived on a teacher's paycheck and picked up extra classes to make ends meet. I opened the envelope and saw neatly stacked 20s and 50s. My eyes blurred. My hands shook so much I almost dropped the money. "Aunt Linda, I can't take this. This is too much for you." She took my hand, firm and gentle. "Family helps family. You thought you were alone, but you're not. If you need it, my couch is still there. It's not big, but you can sleep there." I couldn't hold it in anymore. I inhaled hard and blurted out, "Aunt Linda, I lied. I didn't lose my job. I won the lottery. $47 million. The room seemed to slow. Linda looked at me. She didn't gasp like I expected. She was quiet for a few seconds and then nodded. "Oh, so you were testing them?" I swallowed. I wanted to know who really cared. I was afraid if I told them, they'd only see the money. Aunt Linda sat silent for a minute, then spoke in a steady voice. "Do you know how Robert and I split up? Everyone said it was because we didn't match. But the truth's different. When your grandmother died, I inherited $50,000. Not huge, but with a young couple it was a start. I wanted to save for a little house. But Robert, he forged a signature and pulled the investment into a friend's restaurant. A year later the place failed, and the money was gone. When I asked him about it, he said, 'That's our money. I have as much right as you.'" Her voice trembled a bit, but her eyes were bright. That day I learned something. Money doesn't change people. It just shows who they really are. Someone can love you or use you, and money strips that away. I stayed quiet, tears falling, shaking and strangely relieved. "You're the only person I wanted to tell first. I didn't tell Dad, I didn't tell Mom, not even Emily or David. You're the first to know." Linda squeezed my hand harder. "Rachel, I don't want your money. I'm glad you got a chance to change your life. But don't let this secret swallow you. Use it to do good, for yourself and for others." With the rain tapping the glass, I realized something. In a family full of selfishness, there was one person willing to give almost everything when I needed it. And she didn't ask for anything even after she knew I had a fortune. Right then I knew I'd found real support. Aunt Linda would be the one I could trust. A week after the diner meal with Aunt Linda, I texted every family member, "This Sunday, 5 p.m., come to my apartment. I have an important announcement." Nobody said no. Maybe deep down they figured I'd ask for more money. Or worse, beg them to bail me out one last time. That afternoon the sky over Portland turned heavy and gray, fine drizzles sliding off the rooftops. In my tiny apartment, I set chairs in a circle. One by one they came in. Elaine arrived with Richard, faces guarded. Thomas and Clara came next, their looks full of judgment. Emily wore a designer coat. Brian stood by her, glancing at his watch. David showed up late, alcohol smelling on his jacket. Margaret walked in with a thin smile, Kyle trailing behind. Only Linda came a little later and sat down last, her eyes soft on me. The room felt heavy like the rain on the window. I breathed deep and stood in the middle. Thanks for coming. I know there's been a lot of talk about me lately. I want to clear things up. My mom nodded a little, as if to say, finally you're saying something. My dad crossed his arms, expression cold. Emily tilted her head, trying to look concerned. I looked each of them in the eye. Yes, my company had trouble. Yes, I reached out to family. I asked for $5,000. Just $5,000. But what I got back wasn't help. I got lectures. Fancy excuses. Calls that were never returned. David looked down, fingers scrolling his phone. My dad cleared his throat, ready to justify. I raised a hand to stop him. Let me finish. For years, I gave more than I had. I helped David get through rehab. I paid for Emily's wedding. I helped pay to fix Dad's roof. And when I needed help, where were you? In Cancun. At the Audi showroom. At the lake house. Or worse, talking behind my back like I was a burden. Margaret inhaled, about to shoot back. But I stared at her, my voice cold. Aunt Margaret, you were the first to tell everyone I was irresponsible. Do you know how it feels to sit in a car in the rain and hear cruel words from your own blood? The room fell silent. No one met my eyes. Richard shrugged. Everyone has money troubles. Emily mumbled. You don't understand, my dad said dryly. This is the lesson you need. I took a long breath. Strange as it sounds, I didn't feel angry. I felt lighter, like I put down a weight. I don't need any more lectures from any of you. From now on, I'll take care of myself. Family means something different to me now. An hour later, they left one by one. The apartment smelled of cold coffee and deep silence. Only Linda stayed to help clear the plates. She put a hand on my shoulder and whispered, You did it. Hard but necessary. 1 year later, my life had changed so much I would have doubted it if someone else told me. I left the old apartment and bought a small house in a quiet Portland suburb with a backyard big enough for a few rows of lavender. 3 streets over, Linda lived in a new single-level house with wide doors so she could get around if her health failed. I bought that house for her, but put it in a trust so she would never feel like charity. I left accounting and started a nonprofit called Second Family. Its mission: help lonely elders and people abandoned by their families. Every day we send volunteers to fix homes, cook dinners, or simply sit and talk. One case I'll never forget. Walter, 82, living alone in a cramped East Side apartment. His wife had died, his kids moved away, he had no one. When our team knocked, he looked at us like the world had shown up at his door. That month we threw him a birthday. A small cake, a few candles. He cried and said, shaking, It's been 10 years since anyone wished me happy birthday. In that moment, I knew my money had found its meaning. Not buying approval from blood relatives, but bringing joy to people who had no one left to call family. My relationship with my own family shifted to polite distance. I still get birthday calls and send Christmas cards. But I hold no expectations. No hope that they will change. I don't need that anymore. Sometimes David still texts asking for investment in some pipe dream. Emily complains about the cost of a kitchen remodel. I smile and reply politely. They don't know that sometimes I quietly help covering part of Dad's hospital bill when he had a heart attack, sending an anonymous payment to Kyle when he finally agreed to rehab. They will never know where it came from. I keep that secret because it is no longer about them. It is about my peace. One summer evening, Linda and I sat on her porch, watching the sunset over the Cascades. She squeezed my hand and said, See, money didn't ruin you. It just gave you choices. And you chose right. I looked back over the path I'd walked, from hands shaking over a ticket, to crying in that old car, to the moment I saw Walter smiling by his cake. I knew my life had been reborn. What I gained wasn't just $47 million. It was freedom. Freedom to say no. Freedom to stop buying love with money. Freedom to choose who belongs in my life.